So let me start by welcoming you all to the online launch of our latest publication, Pangolins Scales of Injustice, written by Richard Peirce. My name is Pippa Parker. I'm the publisher of the Straight Nature imprint at Penguin Random House, and it's great to have you all here to join us in what I'm sure will be a really interesting discussion. Richard Peirce has written several books, and his last 6 were written with us in Straight Nature. And in many cases, he's focused on controversial and illegal practices involving wildlife. And the pangolin book is no different. Pangolins are benign, enduring, gentle, lovable creatures. But they've been in the spotlight for some time because of the huge trade in them. In fact, pangolins are the most trafficked animals in the world, which places the 8 species that occur around the world under severe threat of extinction. But over the last year, pangolins have had an even bigger spotlight fall on them. And that has been because of their possible link to the coronavirus. It's been proposed that they are potential vectors of the virus, helping to transfer it from bat hosts to human hosts. And it's these and other issues that Richard will be talking about today. He will be in discussion with Don Pinnock, an author in his own right, journalist, conservationist. Don wears many hats, and they will be talking about the many issues that Richard raises in his book. Before I hand over to them, I just want to alert you to the question and answer button at the bottom of your screens. As the discussion ensues, please feel free to post any questions that might come up, and Richard will tackle those at the end of the session. And also to let you know that the book, Pangolins Scales of Injustice, will be available at a special price, and you can get it through Loot, which by entering, going into Loot online, and you will get it at a special price, or if you wait till the end of the session, you'll be transferred automatically to Loot, and you can order the book straight away. Enough from me. I'm going to hand over now to Richard and Don. Thank you.
Thank you, Pippa.
Thank you, Pippa. Thank you very much. Hello, Richard.
Hi there.
We have done this before, have we not?
No, I think we have. Yes, absolutely. Once or twice, yeah.
Well, congratulations again, yet again. But before we talk about the book that we're talking about here, all your books read like wildlife thrillers. They're sort of half annoying in that I want to flip through them and I start reading and I can't stop. They really are extraordinary. They have such strong storylines. And just before we look at the book itself, I mean, how did you get into writing? Do you have a prior life in the craft of writing? Give me a bit of a background of how you got into it, because you do it so darn well.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not sure that I do. When I was 18, I joined a local newspaper in the west of England called the West Somerset Free Press as an apprentice reporter on a 6-month probationary period. And then I was going to be articled and go on for another 2 years. I didn't actually last the probationary period because the editor called me up at about 5 months and said, I don't really think a weekly local newspaper in rural England is for you. You need something a bit faster and blah, blah, blah. And he said, your approach is all wrong for us. Going around dreary graveyards on a Monday morning, taking the names off wreaths and things is not really you. So he wrote me a great reference, actually. I was hugely grateful. It basically said, this guy's not a bad journalist, or might not be a bad journalist, and blah, 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 but he's not for us. And he was basically saying bugger off to a sensational tabloid. So that was my first foray into writing professionally, and it ended in getting the sack and being told to go somewhere more suited to my temperament.
Well, that's good. I mean, then now we've got these nice books instead of a hack in some local newspaper.
Yeah, well,
Richard, you started it with sharks and things aquatic, and you've written quite a few books on that, but you've shifted across to African wildlife. Is that, is there a connection between the stories you're telling and why the shift? Is there something significant there?
It kind of wasn't a total shift because I'm still on the board of the Shark Trust. Sharks are still the coolest guys on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. But it was sort of deliberate, because I believe that if we're going to save the wildlife on the planet, if we don't save the iconic megafauna in Africa, we've got no chance at all. I mean, if you say wildlife to someone in Mexico, or I don't know, Kuala Lumpur or South America or Britain or wherever, what comes to mind, I think, for lots of them is the image of a lion, a tiger, an elephant, a giraffe, you know, big megafauna animals. And I think the battle is in Africa. And if we lose the battle to save Africa's megafauna, I think we've lost the battle to save what's left of the world's wildlife. We may have lost the battle to save the planet. So I'm not suggesting that I can do very much about it, but I wanted to do my little bit. And so that, and the fascination with Africa's animals anyway, is what sort of occasioned that shift. Also, when I started in sharks about 30 something, that's funny, isn't it, in sharks? When I started with sharks about 30 years ago, there was very few of us, sort of voices in the wilderness, crying out that sharks weren't bad guys after all and they were under threat. Now there's a worldwide army of people, you know, dedicated to giving sharks a future. So I kind of felt that really I'd sort of, you know, done my bit by helping create the army, and it was time to do something else.
Okay, now if we look at the books on the screen, the thing that really jumps out is that pangolin's gaze. You actually talk about that gaze. I just want to, whoops, get the cover. You say that you talk about the accusation and the question in the gaze of a pangolin. And you also talk about somebody who got going trying to save pangolins about that gaze. And you know, it's on the cover of the book. You clearly met some pangolins. How did they affect you?
I did. Initially, I suppose it was slight disappointment, because I'd heard from so many people that the eye of the pangolin is special. Bruce Young made a film called The Eye of the Pangolin. Various people have said to me there's something very special about it, etc. So when I saw my first pangolin eye, not quite sure what I expected. I didn't know, maybe I expected it to change color or sparkle or start, you know, doing something weird. But then I looked a bit more, and the animal looked at me, and you sort of get it. And when people say this animal looks at you, into you, through you, around you, makes you feel guilty, makes you feel, it's just very strange. And I don't know how much of that is the pre-suggestion of what you're expecting and how much of it is actual, but the eye of the pangolin is a very, very special thing.
Now, I mean, they're extraordinary animals. I had a bit of the same feeling, really. And do they really have tongues that are longer than 40 centimeters? I mean, what are the special things that you'd like to talk about that are special about pangolins?
I think everything's special about pangolins. I mean, you know, here you've got this kind of miniature armored car with a tongue, 60%, you know, I mean, it's just, they're amazing animals. And they're so innocent. They just don't deserve to be, they don't deserve the title of the most trafficked mammal on the planet. There is a massive injustice in that. But there's so much about them that's fascinating. I interviewed a Bushman elder, and it put me in my place, actually, because he was an elder at 59. And so I'm a little bit older, actually quite a bit older than that. So it gave elder a whole new meaning. I wondered how much borrowed time I'd already used up. But he was amazing in describing to me the Bushman connections with pangolins. And when I was writing the book and researching it, they have extraordinary sort of symbolism for people all over Africa and indeed all over Asia. These are very, very, very special animals. I think the tragedy is that they earned the title of the most trafficked mammal on the planet long after the trouble had started. Obviously, to get that title, you've got to be put in that position. So how many have died before all of us guys are now trying far too belatedly to do something about it?
I think one of the problems that the pangolin had is that many animals defend themselves with teeth or claws or things like that. The pangolin rolls up into a little hard ball, which is all very well. It might deter a lion, but it doesn't deter somebody who wants to pick it up and walk away with it.
You know, poor old pangolin provides a football for a lion, but basically an easy carry away prize for the human who's hunting them. And what a prize given the value of them.
Yeah, you just put it in a bag and walk away.
Yeah.
Richard, I want to talk about you. You've met some extraordinary people who look after pangolins. And I want to talk a little bit about that. Or would you talk a little bit about that? These are wonderful human beings who look after these extraordinary creatures. I mean, look at that creature. Isn't it just so beautiful?
Yeah, yeah.
Those claws are devastating. I'm just going to flip through a few little pictures.
There's an eye, yeah.
Yeah, look at that. That's accusation if I ever saw it. Don't hurt me.
And there's the Lions football.
Yeah. Okay, could you talk about these people and why they have to do what they do?
That's Nikki and Karen at the Johannesburg Wildlife Veterinary Hospital. And I was reading a couple of days back, they've just had an enormous boost because Investec have given the money to establish a specific pangolin ward at the hospital. So, that is just brilliant news. There's going to be this totally dedicated pangolin facility run by these two guys who give their all to pangolins, really. I mean, they're very, very special people. And dealing with pangolins all the time and for the length of time they've been doing it, it's what really comes across with people like that is how special these animals still are. You obviously don't ever sort of lose your enthusiasm for them. They don't ever lose their shine. I mean, if anything, I think they're more dedicated probably now, and I think they'll probably agree with that, than on the day they started. They cast a spell on you. If ever, you get a chance to watch one and you're lucky enough to watch one, I think anyone listening to this is going to find that they have fallen under the spell of a pangolin. So they're very, very special people. The story started with a guy called Ray Janssen, and for a storyteller, and you'll appreciate this as a writer, it was a dream start to a story because I met this kind of, hope you won't mind my saying this, kind of gangling, absent-minded professor-looking character, sort of a bearded guy, and there we go, there's Ray, yeah. And then he started telling me his story, and this guy is a day in, day out hero. He sits in parking lots waiting for sting operations to go down that he's organized with a 9mm pistol on the seat beside him, and every once in a while people do start shooting, and this man is right at the front of the war to save these animals. So it was a gift to me that I suddenly had this guy, and I mean, I couldn't wait for the interview to end and go back and start scribbling. I mean, I just wanted to capture him and what he was all about immediately, and I hope I did it. I hope he doesn't mind that I portrayed him that way.
Well, I want to talk about that in a moment. It is unusual to have a professor with a gun on the seat beside him. I felt that sometimes just before lectures, but this is a different context. You talk about, and in fact, you start the book with a sting operation, which is a real thriller. I mean, it's unputdownable, and it's an adventure story. Did you decide to tackle the subject the way? Did you set about to write it that way, or did the story just unfold that way?
That was the gift Ray gave me. My wife and I, Jackie and I, went and had a cup of coffee with him, and within 5 minutes of him talking, I thought, hey, this is fantastic. This is how we start. So I asked him if he minded that I started off that way. I asked him if he minded his name being used, etc., etc. So there was kind of no decision to make. The decision was made by the fantastic story he was telling me and by the guy he was,
Could you talk a bit about that sting operation?
The way it went, well, I've had to change a couple of names there, and I've had to invent bits, but I mean, it is basically, I think, as true as ever I can get it. The character, the poacher from Zim, is fictional, but most of the animals are trafficked down from Zim, down that way. Everything apart from that initial poaching bit actually happened, although the names are changed. The guy who was originally rung up by the poachers, his name's changed, he's real. And yeah, I mean, I think there were 3 or 4 false starts to the sting, which got everybody very frustrated. Nerves get very, very tight. And these poachers, I mean, and traffickers, they're very often armed as well. So when you go into these situations, you can see by the shot on the screen there, it's kind of an action situation. And Ray told me that more than once these shots have been fired, and more than once that the traffickers have tried to leg it. Shots have had to be fired into the air. So it's pretty high drama stuff. And when Zambezi, the animal, and that's the real name of the animal, when Zambezi was recovered and Ray took him to the hospital, all of that is exactly as told to me. It's exactly what happened. Yeah, it was very exciting to write. And this is going on every day. This is not isolated. Ray and people like Ray are conducting these operations, I wouldn't say daily, but I guess possibly weekly. I mean, that's how intense it is. That's how bad the trafficking is.
The story about Zambezi is just so nice because you track him through from capture to being saved to being looked after and rehabilitated. It's a stirring piece. Now that's the South African or the African side, but the trafficking is a push from this side, but it's mainly a pull from the other side. And you went to Vietnam and Laos. What did you find there? And I suppose the bigger question is, what's the chance of turning off that trade? Could you talk a little bit about your adventures in Asia?
Yeah, and perhaps we can come back to your remark, turning off the trade, because I'm sure we both agree that that's got to be the major target. If the demand remains, the supply will remain with it. But okay, yeah. So actually, we went to Asia, and the pangolins were very much a secondary thing. I'm afraid we were actually there filming a film, Plug coming up, called Lions, Bones, and Bullets. But Asia was a horror story. It's kind of a wildlife supermarket. I went to one restaurant. This was a specific pangolin foray. I went to one restaurant and said, "Have you got any? What do they call it? Have you got any wild meat?" I think that's kind of code for wildlife. And he immediately offered me a civet cat. And so I sort of said, "No, I didn't say that's a bit boring, but I said, no, I've had civet before. Have you got anything more interesting?" He said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, I'd really love to eat a pangolin." And immediately he said, "Yep, fine, $300 a kilo." So here I was being offered the potential vector for the first SARS outbreak in 2002. And then when I turned that down, within a minute, I'm being offered possibly the vector for the current COVID-19 SARS outbreak. Quite extraordinary at $300 a kilo for the meat. I must have hummed and hawed or something and said it was expensive, because he then said, "Well, okay, do you want the whole animal?" And so I said, "Well," and then he said $4,000. So I must have hummed and hawed and bargained. So he tried to interest me by saying, "You can have your private dining room." He took me upstairs to a room off a big room, which was laid, I think, for 8 or 10 people, and said, "You can have this in with the price of the thing, your pangolin, will this," so on and so forth. And then I must have been dithering more, because he said, "Don't worry, we'll show you the pangolin." And the strong inference was that they would bring the animal to the table and kill it, so that I knew that I was getting what I was paying for. Horrific, horrific, horrific stuff. Anyway, we got down to $3,000 a pangolin, and I made an excuse and left. But what was stunning, disappointing, and terrifying, Don, was the ease with which a tourist with no special knowledge or anything else can just wander in off the street and be offered products. I hate that word product, actually, when they're used for animals. Be offered things that are completely illegal, that simply shouldn't be happening. If I can do it that easily, then where are the police? Why can't they see it? Of course they can.
Now, that's a picture on the screen of you in a market. Is that dog a product for sale? Was that lunch?
I think he ought to move on quickly, actually. If I was him, I wouldn't have hung around like that. That's not a good idea in a wildlife market in Southeast Asia.
Can you talk a bit about the wildlife markets, Richard? Because you were in them. And, they are, especially in Wuhan, clearly a vector for the COVID pandemic.
Absolutely. Well, what we found was, as I said, an absolute horror story. And our guide was telling us, this was in Laos, actually. Our guide was telling us that on the table was the sort of legit stuff, and under the table was the illegitimate stuff. Well, when we walked in, there was a group of us. I think they got suspicious, so there was no point in us asking to see under the table. But almost anything you can imagine was on sale there. Rabbits, rats, mice, snakes, frogs, dogs, cats, pigeons, little piglets, you name it, a whole huge sort of load of animals, just all there for sale. Pretty horrifying stuff. And these wet markets, and that's kind of a wrong term when used for animals, actually, because wet markets started off by referring to fish. But these wet markets, and the one in Wuhan, when an animal's killed, it's killed on a block, let's say, and then it's not really cleaned between that animal and the next one. So there's a tremendous opportunity for pathogens to pass from one sort of thing to another on the block because it hasn't been cleaned properly. While the animals are waiting for sale, they're stacked up in sort of wire cages, one on top of another. So if, for example, you've got bats on top, pangolins underneath, or civets underneath, that could very easily be how the coronavirus got from bats, for the feces and urine and stuff trickling down through the stuff, to the animals underneath in the stack. So they're pretty horrific, and I don't really see why wildlife can't just be banned from sale in these markets, full stop. We all thought that might be going to happen last March, I think it was. There was great hope, and the Chinese did put a ban in, but they then conducted a huge process throughout the year reviewing their wildlife laws, and sadly, what they've done towards the end of last year, there's so many loopholes, they might not have bothered. The good news is that Vietnam appear to have put in robust laws and to be policing them. So there's a small bit of good news there.
A lot of this is about food, isn't it? I mean, Chinese traditional medicine will use the scales.
Yeah.
But and there's two food places. One is in Africa, where these things are eaten, and then the other is in Asia. And you talk about the eat anything poverty. It's a really interesting term you use. Could you elaborate on that? I mean, you get a sense from what you're saying that people are so hungry, but that's clearly not true in Asia, or it might be true in Africa.
I think it is true in Asia, actually. I mean, we saw an awful lot of poverty. And if you're a sort of rich Vietnamese, Laotian, Chinese, then you'll be eating pangolin. If you're way down the food chain, so to speak, you'll be eating anything else, like this poor dog in front of us on the screen. So I do think when you're hungry, you will eat anything. One of the things that I find utterly terrifying is the prospect that the current pandemic will lead to a lot more hungry people in Africa. And that will put a lot more pressure on all bushmeat sort of species. And the pangolin is one of those. I can't remember the percentage, but a big slice of Africa's rural population live below the $2 a day poverty line. I don't think in the West we have any concept what that's like. And if you're below that line, you'll go poaching pangolin, you'll go poaching rhino, you'll basically eat anything because you're hungry and you're desperate.
Now, those are some pictures that I think you took in Asia, right?
Yeah. I mean, this was actually a market. One, two, three. The guy in the red apron, he's chopping up a civet cat. And then they actually stopped us filming. But I mean, the civet cat is the probable vector for the first SARS. And there it was, just being chopped up in front of us. Above that, on the right, is tiger wine. Now, supposed to be illegal. Lions in South Africa, as we all know, skeletons are being shipped off to Southeast Asia in great numbers. They end up in tiger wine. You can't tell a lion and a tiger skeleton apart, so it's very easy, for lions to step in and fill the demand gap in the tiger thing. But we walked into these shops, no attempt made whatsoever to hide these products, which I stress are illegal. I can't see what I'm holding. I think I'm holding a claw or something. But none of this stuff should be being sold. The other thing that was really frightening was that they were making no attempt to hide it. So, as I said earlier, if Western tourists can walk in off the street and this stuff is in the window, what are the police doing? Their governments have signed up to CITES resolutions, and they should not be doing this. And it's extraordinarily irresponsible, I think, for governments to turn their back on what they've signed up to. And then, boy, I was just going to say chickens come home to roost. That would have been unfortunate. Boy, does it come home to roost when you end up with a pandemic that as a result of the most expensive meal ever eaten on the planet. I mean, someone needs to call these guys to account. They really do. These governments who are not involved in this trade need to be putting the screws on the governments who are. They're operating illegally.
Richard, what's with the gun in the picture on the bottom, towards the bottom left? Is that what you carry around?
No, I didn't. I didn't carry that around. I think that was amongst a load of exhibits that we were shown in someone's office when we were doing an interview about the pangolin trade in Hanoi. And I think it was basically a lot of seized stuff. I think I could see some pills there. That was probably illegal drugs that were seized or something, a mobile phone used in something or other. That was all illegal stuff that had been seized and we were being shown. No, we weren't threatened with that and we didn't carry that around, no.
Yeah. Now you say that if China and the Far East stop consuming, Africa will stop supplying. What are the chances of that? I mean, could you, we're going to talk about CITES in a moment. I'd like to ask you about that, but that's a statement you made. If Asia stops consuming, Africa will stop supplying.
It's a very complex, multi-layered issue, and I think we've got to try and keep pressure on both ends because there are lots and lots of challenges to wildlife apart from the consumption of them by Southeast Asia. I mean, human-wildlife conflict, habitat loss, all the other things that we're very, very aware of. But if you cut off the demand, then there's no need for a supply, is there? And whether it's a rhino, I mean, I remember someone years ago saying to me, rhinos have got no chance because you imagine a cow wandering around in Europe with a lump of gold stuck on the front of its head. How long would it be before someone came along, killed that cow, took the lump of gold off? That is essentially quite a good description of a rhino in many ways. So we're back to poverty again, aren't we? And if you're poor, you'll take the money. And so I think the easiest battle to win, there you are, the Chinese People's National Congress. Not the easiest battle. We can be targeted at one area of the world, which is the consumption area, the consuming area, and we should be targeting that. I mean, why do they need to go on eating wild animals? I simply don't understand it. In China, they've lifted tens of millions of people out of poverty. They don't need to eat bushmeat anymore like poor Africans do. They should damn well stop it and stop it soon. It's a terrifying thing as well because of the amount of other coronaviruses that may just be waiting to be the next transfer to humans. So, I mean, I'm sick of reading things that tell me that we're under this one might be an easy one to get over. Well, boy, this has brought the world to its knees. So if there might be other ones waiting in the wings, courtesy of some people eating wild animals, then it's got to stop.
Richard, the organization that has the job of, it's a UN organization of regulating trade of wild animals is CITES. Now, I spent a lot of time criticizing CITES, but it is the only organization around. What's your view of CITES, and is it managing? Is it doing some good? Is it going to, solve problems, or is it toothless?
That's a very fascinating question because I mean, a quick answer could be say, well, it's useless. So what's the point in it? Another answer might be, well, we're better off with it than with something than without it. It's a popular misconception that guys like you and I have to correct that CITES is a conservation organization. It's not. As you just said, it's a trade organization. It governs trade, and it's supposed to govern trade in such a way as to stop endangered species becoming more endangered or stop them becoming endangered in the first place. But my trip to Vietnam and Laos, etc., just showed me how utterly toothless CITES is, because there in front of me every day was evidence that they were completely ignoring what they had signed up to on an international convention. What's being done about it? Nothing.
I've come across a lot of CITES permits for export, which are fraudulent. People keep sending me these. I got one that was for, I think, 40 African grey parrots that was used to transport 2 elephants. There's all sorts of loopholes. So I mean, it's a complicated process. I just want to jump to the coronavirus again. A colleague of mine, Tiara Walters, and I, sort of at the beginning of last year, we dug out from Baylor College. The two professors there were looking into the genetic similarities between coronavirus and pangolins, and they were working with Chinese scientists in Hainan. And we got hold of both of them and persuaded them to allow us, even though their research hadn't been peer reviewed, they allowed us to actually publish the link, the probable link between pangolins and coronavirus. And it turned out to be a worldwide scoop, and it got the highest number of hits on Daily Maverick that they've ever had. Could you talk a bit about that link between pangolins? Are they a vector?
I'm not a scientist, and I don't know. I mean, like you, I sort of believe what I read, but it does look as if the matches are fairly convincing. But here we are, what are we, 20 years, 19 years after the first SARS, and civet cats were widely touted as the vectors in that situation, but science still hasn't 100% agreed that. So I wonder really whether pangolins ever will be 100% identified and agreed by the scientists as being the vector in this case. But as a layman reading things, it does look as if the evidence is fairly compelling.
There was a theory that it came out of a Chinese laboratory, and I think the WHO went to have a look. I'm not sure the outcome of that.
I think that's one of the few things they came out and knocked on the head and said that they thought that was actually highly unlikely. They more or less said no.
So many of these pandemics have come from wild animals. There's no reason to think it should suddenly pop out from a lab, I would imagine.
Well, exactly, sure.
But one of the things that concerns me, Richard, is that given that there is a link to things like pangolins and COVID, and and bats, there's a strong chance that people will start killing these animals. It could be a very bad news for animals, wild animals, when they're seen as being a vector for things.
No, absolutely, sure. Just very quickly, let's just run through. I jotted down while we were waiting. AIDS, SARS, MERS, Ebola, swine flu, bird flu, all clearly from the animal kingdom. But here's a fascinating thing I found before we came on this morning. The Sunday Times newspaper in UK have a team called Insight, which I think is one of the best investigative journalistic teams in the world. And they published something back in last July, their investigation sourced the beginning of the COVID-19 story to April, May 2012 to a copper mine near, I hope I'm getting this right, Tongguan in Yunnan province. And they then went step by step, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, taking us up to the middle of 2019. And there was an investigation into the bat colonies down there. People died down there cleaning out bat dung and feces and stuff from these mines. And then a guy aged 63, another guy aged 42, both died in April, June 2012. And let me just read what it says here. It says there, yes, complete similarities to coronavirus in every way, all their symptoms. So how long has it actually been around before it got to a market in Wuhan maybe and jumped from there? Who knows? Apparently, possibly quite a long time.
Yeah. Do you know, just jumping back to the pangolin trade, do you have numbers on the number of pangolins that are poached? What are we looking at?
Let's just run through some stuff here. 2016 to 2019, there were 52 seizures, which involved 228 tons of scales. Now, scales don't weigh very much. And that was probably, this is a guess, but the experts agree this, that was probably about 10% only of what was actually trafficked. 2019, the 1 year, 97 tons were intercepted leaving Africa, mostly via Nigeria. And again, the experts say that this is more than 160,000 animals. So, you know, these are pretty horrifying statistics. What else have we got? I thought I had another even worse one. Let's talk on, and I'll look for it while we're talking.
Yeah. But given those figures...
Sorry, Don, I read a report 2 days ago in something called Down to Earth, which said that well over 1 million pangolins have been trafficked out of Africa to Southeast Asia in the last decade.
Well, the question that comes out of that, Richard, is you know, are these animals going to survive? What's the pangolin future with that? That's eye-watering numbers. And especially when you get that tonnage of scales, the scales weigh nothing, and they get captured, you know, found in tons. It's the number of pangolins. Can they survive? Are they going to live? What's the prognosis?
I think that's a very good question. That's another chilling question. I mean, again, I read something last week that I can't remember where it was. They're heading for extinction in Cameroon. So local extinction is around the corner in Cameroon, apparently. We were offered pangolin scales in loads of places in Vietnam and Laos. So, you know, I don't think they can survive if the present rate of attrition goes on. But Ray and Nikki and people make a very good point. In a way, trying to work this out, you're kind of counting ghosts. You're looking backwards because nobody knows yesterday how many were poached specifically. So you have to wait for the figures to come out a year or 2 years later on how many seizures there were and how many that's estimated to be a blah, blah, blah. So you're continually looking backwards. So we don't, I suppose, know what the population is or an accurate measure of the attrition. But Ray is very strong on the fact he thinks that we're only intercepting about 10%. I mean, think about that, only intercepting 10% of what's actually being trafficked.
That's totally frightening. That's such a sweet picture. The babies ride on their mums. They're so cute. How can you eat them? That's terrifying.
Actually, that baby's eye, I wish I could see that closer. That's a fabulous, yeah.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. Can I jump to something? Am I permitted to move out of pangolins? Because actually, when we talked earlier, you said you'd have to reread the book because you're in lions. Could we talk about your film on lions? Is that permissible?
In a limited way, I think so. We are just about to have a sort of screening for those who were involved in the film. I'm not sure when, but in the coming weeks. It's been a 2.5-year project. We meaning myself and my two partners, I don't think they'll mind being named, Anton and Jasmine, we decided very early on that we would try and approach this from a sort of non-biased, blank sheet of paper, genuine investigative point of view, and present the watching audience with a case, and they could decide guilt, innocence, whatever, at the end of the case. I don't think we've fully succeeded because for me as the protagonist, if you like, and for them, it's impossible not to be swayed by what you're seeing as you go down the journey. And that sort of colors you. But we did our very best to be neutral. We did our very best to give a fair shout to everyone. As such, I think it's a compelling piece of work. I think when people watch it, they will see that we try to reflect all strands of opinion and so on and so forth. It will be out very, very, very soon. I'm afraid I can't tell you when. Actually, I noticed you were on a guest list the other day to see it in a couple of weeks. So you'll see it pretty soon now. We're hoping for a premiere in Monaco in June, but that's not decided yet. But June in Monaco is the 60th Monaco TV Festival. We were very fortunate to be backed in the film. One of our donors was the Prince Albert II Foundation in Monaco, and so they've also been very helpful with helping with the film. Look, everyone had to wait to see it, but we're very proud of it. We think it does a good job. We think it tells the story, and I think it's a very compelling story. And I don't really want to say much more because I think it might just detract from what people are going to see.
Okay, okay. Look, this is the last question. Then I'm going to open up. Quite a few people are asking questions, which I'll reflect. But this is the thing that puzzles me, because you and I, in a sense, are in the same business of looking at the planet and saying, we're doing damage, and what can we do about it? How hopeful are you? I mean, what keeps you up, gets you up in the morning and keeps you going?
You know,
like to do that.
I guess, Don, I'm going to expect that you're possibly the same. I mean, if I wasn't an optimist, then I would be looking for a lamppost and a length of rope. You know, you've got to be an optimist, and you've got to think that we can make a difference. Otherwise, why would we do what we do at all? And I believe that. I've seen lots of instances in the shark sector in the last sort of 15 years where we've had lots of victories. We certainly haven't won the war to conserve all the sharks on the planet, etc., all the populations, but great progress has been made in many areas, and it's been made by activists. So activists are to be supported, campaigners are to be supported. And look, we have to turn this around, and the reason is really simple. There's no other option.
Yeah, okay. I'm just jumping to the questions. One you've already answered. Given the commodity has a price driven by supply, what hope is there for reducing that demand? I think that's kind of been covered, but here's an interesting one. Where does the name pangolin come from?
Hang on,
and what are their scales?
Now, I want to go to the top of the class because I did actually look that up. Where does the name pangolin come from? It comes from a Malay.
Strange name, isn't it?
It comes from, no, this is really annoying because I did actually scribble that out in my notes. And it comes from a Malay word, and I was fascinated, so bear with me while I find it. It comes from a Malay word like pangolin or something. Okay, now let's go on to another one, and I'll flip through my notes and find that answer. Oh, got it.
While you do that.
No, I've got it. Pangolin comes from, I hope I'm getting the pronunciation right, Pengguling, Pengguling, which is a Malay word meaning roller. And I guess that comes from the fact it rolls into a ball. So that's where it comes from.
Seems reasonable and appropriate. Another question is South Africa the main transit hub, or what are the conduits into Asia?
Well, most of the interceptions in Nigeria, and the routing on a broad scale, the routing seems to be that Nigeria is a sort of collection point, and then they go from Nigeria to Southeast Asia via Singapore.
Oh, yeah. There's a question about price of scales. I'm sure that's not something you can answer.
No, it is
easily.
No, here we are. You see, I've done my homework. Where is it now? I think 1 kilogram of scales is plus or minus $3,000.
That was my phone. Sorry. That's a lot. My goodness.
Well, it is.
What exactly are they used for?
Well, exactly. When you consider what you get out of it, you know, you're getting basically a whole lot of thin, keratinous things that you grind up and use for various things like rhino horn. And very often there's a bit of flesh still attached, rather repulsive to talk about. Very often there's a bit of flesh still attached to the scales. Yeah, $3,000 a kilo for keratin.
Sure, for nothing, for fingernails.
Yeah.
Michael Hartman asks, is there really sufficient evidence that the pandemic originates from the animal or was not human made? We sort of covered that. Do you want to expand on that or not?
Well, all I would say, Michael, is that I don't think there really is 100% evidence. Given the civet cat example, I wonder whether there ever will be 100% evidence. I would like there to be, not because I want to apportion guilt, because I don't think there's any point in apportioning guilt backwards, but just because I hope if we can do that emphatically, it might be a signpost to what we should be doing in the future. I mean, my whole huge hope out of this pandemic is that we learn a few things and press a few reset buttons. If not, I think we, the human race, have just missed probably the biggest opportunity of my life.
Now, here's a really nice question from Dominique Doyle. She says, I recently graduated in nature conservation. Would love to know what your advice is in the field, especially with working with endangered species.
Gosh, how on earth do you answer that? That's a great question, but I mean, really, we ought to be having dinner or something to talk about that, or spend a week. I think my advice is enjoy what you do and carry on doing it. You know, every time you're close to a wild animal, it's a privilege. Every time you're close to a wild animal, it can be an extraordinary experience. And if you're making a living at it, you are blessed. Count yourself lucky and carry on doing it.
Yeah, my advice actually is pretty similar. Get out and be with these animals. Yeah. They give you the ticket, basically. You know, you get the pangolin ticket. They give it to you. Do something. You know, I got the elephant ticket, and I wrote a book called The Last Elephants with Colin Bell. You know, and that was the result of an elephant, really. I mean, I had a confrontation with a female elephant, which was totally extraordinary. And I went, wow, these are totally amazing. Once you get that commission from the animal, you've had it. You're going to do something about it. So, I mean, my advice is go and be with it. It doesn't matter whether, if you look at E.O. Wilson, Ed Wilson's probably the finest biologist in the world. It's ants. He hurt, when he was fishing as a kid, he pulled a fish out and the spike went into his eye. So he was blind in one eye. So he couldn't get depth viewing. But he could do well with ants really close up. And he's one of the world's best biologists, and he just got blown away by ants. So
that was a great description. I'm going to give you notice that I'm going to pinch it. You said when you get that commission from an animal, look out for it. I'm going to use that. So thank you very much. And definitely, the wine is on me for that one. That's terrific. I'm going to use that.
I can't claim it's entirely me. I'm working with Helena Creel, who's working on rhinos. She did a book called Meditating with Rhinos, and she got the Rhino Commission from a baby rhino.
Right.
So it's not original. Right. It's original. She's original in it.
Thank you.
She's a Hollywood scriptwriter, by the way, so she knows how to use these words.
If ever I use it, I'll thank her.
Okay. That's, we're pretty much near the end here, where there's sort of 8 minutes or so. Belinda's mentioned something. I'm not sure what that means. Is there anything else you'd like to sort of chat about?
Well, just two things. I think what Belinda might have mentioned is she's referring to a panel discussion that we're doing in about a month's time. We specifically moved the panel. Is that what she's doing? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what she's saying.
Yeah, we moved the panel discussion away from World Pangolin Day so that we sort of stood alone a bit. And we came up with what I hope will be a really interesting angle for people. Of course, it's going to be all about pangolins, but it's actually going to be about the people who work with them that we've talked about. So on the panel is going to be Ray Janssen, Nikki, Karen, and Wendy, who's a scientist. And I'm going to ask them to talk about their experience with pangolins, their work with pangolins. So I want to do something a little bit different and sort of get the humans to tell me their pangolin story. And I'm going to try and sort of draw them into areas they may not be hugely comfortable with. I mean, I want them to tell me their funniest pangolin experience. I want Ray to talk about what it's actually like to sit there with a pistol on the seat beside you, wondering if someone's going to shoot at you in half an hour's time. So I think that'll be an exciting show. I think that's what Belinda's referring to, and that'll be in about a month.
Okay. How do people click into that, Richard? Is there some way, or perhaps Belinda can tell us how they can click into that discussion?
We will be sending out invitations, and then you can also join the Straight Nature Club on www.straightnatureclub.co.za, and then you get invited to all of our talks from there.
Yeah. Oh, a couple of questions have come in, so just let me pop that in. Is it possible to get the book in the Netherlands?
It will be after April when Amazon Europe has got it. So I'm afraid not until after early April.
Okay. There's a couple of others. One is, please both continue to do the work you're doing. You're making a major difference, and I thank you for that. That's very sweet from Michael Hartman. And let me just have a look at a few more. Somebody would have liked us to talk a bit more about the markets in the Far East, but I think that there's probably no time for that. Somebody else, Melanie Davis, notes that the pangolins are tagged. Is that?
That's. Let me just say something about that. I think what she's referring to is the little light clipped to their scales. Yes. And when these guys are being rehabilitated, they have to be taken out to do their evening walk, during which they feed. They need to be kept an eye on, because otherwise they just disappear into the bush and it gets dark. And so those things are little flashing lights very often that you see on them. So the person who's walking with them can basically not lose them. And then there are two other types of tags which enable, once they've been released back into the wild, enable them to be tracked and found, and so on and so forth. So those are the three sort of, if you like, not mechanical, those are the three things that are attached to them. A light for when they're out being walked, and then two types of tags.
So the pangolins essentially have tail lights.
Yeah. Headlights and tail lights, yeah.
How many species of pangolin are there?
Well, there's 8 in the world, and there's 4 African, evenly split. There's 4 African and 4 Asian.
Okay, and
in South Africa, it's the one that we're talking about really today, I guess, is the Temminck's pangolin, which is the one that people like Ray are rescuing every day, and people like Nikki are putting back together.
Okay, and another question from Melanie Davies is what do the Chinese medicine expect to cure with pangolin scales?
Quite a lot of things, really. I mean, there's very often a sort of sexual boost theory to it. Headaches. More fascinating in a way, I think, is what the Bushmen try to cure. Isak, the Bushman elder, who's younger than me, told me that because pangolin are such a calm animal, they use pangolin scales and things, or pangolin products, to cure diarrhea and things like that, to calm a stomach that's got upset. I don't know whether they work or not, but it's like all other things in Chinese medicine. There's a whole load of uses, and they do vary from country to country.
Yeah. Okay, there's another question which has partly been covered. Given that every commodity has a price driven by supply and demand, what's the chance of reducing demand in the Far East?
Well, that leads us to a really interesting point. Everywhere we went in Laos and Vietnam, and everything I've read, the price is almost the same. And this kind of indicates international criminal syndicates sort of, for want of a better expression, price fixing. So it really is a very good indicator that this is not random stuff. It's not just higgledy-piggledy. A price for scales, a price for meat, a price for animals has basically been decided and is being stuck to by the whole by all the trafficking networks.
Nicola Balderson asks, are those caught with pangolins in South Africa being brought to justice?
I don't know. I do know that 3 of the people caught in the sting I described in the book, they all ended up in jail. And the Zimbabwean, I believe, spent some months in jail and has now been sent back to Zimbabwe, where I don't know if he's been released or he's serving more time in jail. But tune into the next one, because Ray will have chapter and verse on exactly, how many do get prosecuted, how many end up in jail, etc. So that's going to be a great question for us to ask Ray in a month's time.
Okay. Well, this is kind of the last, I don't know whether it's a question, it's a comment. Somebody has said they'd really like to have dinner with you and I to continue the discussion further. Clearly, we won't be eating pangolin.
I've got to get back to South Africa. I've now cancelled 6 return trips, but we'll be vaccinated fairly soon, so I'm hoping to get back fairly soon. Yeah, what a great idea. I'll save my money up and I'll pay somehow.
Okay, I'm just going to put the last thing on the screen, and then I'm going to thank you very much. Oh, what happened? Oh, it wouldn't go back on the screen. Anyway, let me stop sharing. Richard, thank you so much. It's been fascinating talking to you. Really do keep up the great work you're doing and write those books. I'm still amazed at how you turned such complex stuff into thriller material in your books. I mean, I actually read the Pangolin book in one sitting. I couldn't stop reading. And I was sort of half cursing you because I had things to do, but I couldn't stop reading. So keep writing, and thank you so much for everything you do.
Don, I'm going to reverse that and say thank you to you, because we do this in slightly different ways, but I think, you know, we're both doing the same thing at the end of the day. And so thank you for you. I think you make a huge difference as well. And I want to thank everybody who's come in here today. There'll be lots of people I know watching this. Sorry, I haven't seen you this year. A little virus got in the way of that, but, you know, hopefully that little virus will get out of the way soon. And keep safe, guys. Keep happy, keep going, keep hopeful. And remember, this is a battle we've got to win, and we have got to press reset buttons. Let me leave you with that message. We've got to press reset buttons.
Thanks, Richard. Now I'll press the reset button on the screen and we will all disappear. And thank you so much. Best of luck with the book.
Thank you.